Please call the roll.
Esslinger,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Beck, Black, Crawford, Mosley, Trent. You established a quorum.
Okay, we have established a quorum. I move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second? Thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are now in executive session. So now I move that we bring Senate Bill 1351 before the committee. Do I have a second?
Second.
The bill is now before the committee. I have a Senate substitute, and I move that we adopt Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1351. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so this committee substitute reflects the changes that Senator Luetkemeyer and the Division of Geology and Land Survey have worked on. The sub adds that the confidential information would be released through a subpoena or court order. It also clarifies that it is all information on the registration document that is confidential, not just the identifiable information. And it also adds that an employee that purposely or knowingly releases confidential information would be in violation of that particular subsection. So I know this will not be the final version of this bill, as Senator Luetkemeyer and the agricultural stakeholders have agreed to work with Senator Beck to address his concerns raised in committee with the floor substitute. So is there any further discussion on any discussion on the adoption of the substitute? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the Senate Committee substitute say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. You have adopted the Senate Committee substitute. So now I move that we do pass Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 875. 1351. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on the do pass motion? Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Beck, Black, Crawford, Mosley, Trent.
By your vote of 5 to 2, you have voted do pass on Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1351. Now I move that we bring Senate Bill 1053 before the committee. Do I have a second? The bill is before the committee. I move that we do pass Senate Bill 1053. Do I have a second? Senator, so as a reminder, this is Senator Trent's bill that we heard last week that would establish a non-renewable temporary license for dietitians. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Brown,
Aye.
Beck, Black, Crawford, Mosley, Trent.
By your vote of 7-0, we have voted do pass on Senate Bill 1053. So now we're going to be leaving exec session. I make a motion that we move out of exec session and resume our regular hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. So today we have two bills, and we're going to start with, we will start with Senate Bill 817. Senator Brown, begin when you're ready.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Ben Brown, State Senator for the 26th District. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 817. One of the most pressing issues facing our state is the current labor shortage. A contributing factor to this is that our state has fallen short in terms of attracting new talent. In fact, over the last decade, we've experienced the slowest rate of population growth in Missouri State's history. This bill aims to address that problem and would make it easier for skilled workers to move here, find a job, and get to work. The Senate bill stipulates that if somebody has 3 years of work experience from a job in a state that doesn't require a license, they would be able to apply that real-world experience towards obtaining a temporary 2-year license in Missouri. This would allow them to continue to work and provide for their family while completing any remaining education or other requirements needed to qualify for their permanent license. This bill also applies to military experience, so it would ease the transition to civilian life for those who have served. The 2-year temporary license was compromised language we arrived at last year, which was supported by professional registration. We believe this struck the right balance between allowing our state to be more competitive in terms of attracting talented competent people to workforce while maintaining safeguards to protect the health and safety of every Missourian. This bill also passed the Senate last year with a vote of 33-1. Missouri has passed reforms to offer license reciprocity to those moving from a state with an existing license. This bill would simply open the door to those that have the proper qualifications and skills, but who by no fault of their own just happen to come from a state that didn't have a statewide license. In order to apply for the temporary license, professionals must show proof of real-world experience, which would have to be verified through wage statements, employment background checks, with the applicant covering the costs. An applicant would also still be required to pass any state or board-required testing to ensure that they possess the necessary qualifications and are competent in their field. This ensures that no one would be able to obtain a license without first demonstrating the proper expertise in their field, whether obtained through stringent educational requirements, real-world experience, or both. This policy has also already been tested. 6 states have enacted similar policies, including 3 directly bordering our state that happen to go even further than this bill would. This means that there are at least 3 states directly competing against us for labor that currently have a leg up. This bill simply allows us to bring Missouri more in line with states like Iowa, Kansas, and Mississippi and stay competitive in terms of attracting talented, hardworking people to our state. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the senator from the committee? Senator Mosley?
So this bill gives them 2 years to get a license?
Yes, it would allow them 2 years. So
Right.
the issue that people are facing, if you're looking at which state you want to move your family, and a lot of times the minimum is 3 years, but sometimes people have worked in the field for decades. And the idea of having to come to Missouri and not having the ability to provide for your family while kind of having to restart and kind of jump through the hoops in order to get the Missouri license when you're already could be more qualified with more experience than someone that you might be doing some kind of apprenticeship under, they're going to be looking somewhere else. They're going to be looking to Iowa or other states that are going to allow them to utilize their real-world experience and apply that to provide for their family right off the bat.
So why did you choose 2 years?
2 years was kind of a compromise that we arrived at, to where we wanted to allow sufficient time, and we looked at different professions and what some of the requirements could hypothetically be. We wanted to make sure we gave enough time, if there were educational requirements, to where somebody could realistically complete that while still being able to work full-time and provide for their family at the same time.
Okay. So, go ahead. I'm done. That's all for right now.
Thank you. And just for the
I don't care that you have to.
information, did you have a comment? Okay.
Yeah, he was commenting to me.
Oh. Okay. Yes, I do believe it's a temporary license, 2 years
I
for
don't think
teachers,
teachers
probationary.
should take 2 years.
Yes,
either.
mhm.
I don't think people should have 2 years. It's too long.
Yeah. It's a probationary certification for a couple of years, and then it's, yeah. But anyways, any other questions for the senator?
I think the laws get too dang lax on licenses.
Okay. So now, I'd like to see, can we see a show of hands of the folks who would like to, who are here to testify on this bill? Okay. So let's go ahead with that. Let's have, who would like to testify in favor of? Please come forward.
And I was commenting to him because he commented to me. I just think
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, James Harris, representing the Opportunity Solution Project, here to go on the record in support of this bill. Many states are kind of having a discussion about occupational licensing. A few years ago, the state passed, like many other states, reciprocity. So if you came here, your spouse moved in the military, and you came from Arkansas, and you had a, let's say, dental hygienist license, you didn't have to go back to school, et cetera. The one thing that's interesting on occupational licensing, most occupations are kind of licensed now, almost in all 50 states. Many occupations have created multi-state compacts where they try to have the same maybe training, testing standards, et cetera. So most occupations would not be covered by this, but there are some that I'd call more working blue collar type of things where I'm just where it would. Interpreters for sign language is one. Missouri and 21 other states require licensure, but some states like Oklahoma, Texas, and Oklahoma do not. Another one is makeup artists. Again, it's Missouri and 36 other states require it, but some states like Nebraska, Texas, and Florida do not. So this would just create a pathway, and I'd almost equate it much like if I was a dental hygienist that's licensed or something, and I come here, I can use reciprocity, but maybe for someone else who is in one of those, and there's only, I think last year we researched maybe 20-ish occupations. Oh, there he's got the list he can distribute. That this would kind of help create a pathway, and I think it's needed because if you're, let's say in your 30s or something, it might be a little more difficult to go back to school. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for this witness? Seeing none, appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else in favor of? Do I have anybody here who would like to testify in opposition to? Do I have anyone for informational purposes only? Seeing none. Senator, do you have any closing remarks?
No, just once again, thank the committee for the opportunity to present.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Now we're going to move on to Senator Black. Let's see. Yeah, Senate Bill 980, Senator Black. Begin when you are ready. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've got my morning voice. Members of the committee, for the record, my name is Rusty Black, and I represent the 12th Senatorial District. This act addresses two significant areas: economic boycotts and unlawful business practice relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion classifications. And also, I probably should have added ESG. First, Senate Bill 980 established provisions to prevent public entities from entering into contracts with companies engaged in economic boycotts. They are defined as boycotts related to fossil fuel-based energy, timber, mining, agriculture, firearms, ammunition, or does not meet or expected to meet environmental standards, etc. These boycotts pose a threat to our economic stability and value. The bill ensures that contracts with public entities include certifications from companies affirming their commitment to refrain from such practices. Failure to comply renders contracts void against public policy, emphasizing the state's stance against economic discrimination. Furthermore, this legislation empowers the Attorney General to enforce these provisions. Companies found to engage in economic boycotts during contract terms face penalties including financial damages payable to the state. Additionally, individuals or entities harmed by violations have avenues for legal recourse, including injunctive relief and compensation for damages and attorney fees. Secondly, Senate Bill 980 addresses unlawful business practices concerning DEI classification. It prohibits private businesses from discriminating against other businesses based on factors such as race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, etc. By outlawing such discriminatory practices, we uphold the principles of fairness and equality in business regulations. The bill provides clear guidelines for what constitutes unlawful business practices related to DEI classifications, ensuring accountability and legal recourse for the victims. It empowers the Attorney General to investigate and take appropriate action against violators, safeguarding the rights of all businesses to fair treatment and opportunities. You'll hear from the Republicans shouldn't interfere with private business contracts. However, we do this all the time, don't we? We know that if you're sitting up in front of me, whether it's utilities, franchise law, insurance, hospital, car manufacturers, liquor distributors, etc. Libertarian deal will work if everybody's doesn't try to kill each other, but that won't happen. So we have to put in some restrictions once in a while. We have a long history of stepping in when companies, typically through their size and outsized influence over the marketplace, create unfair market forces that are not good for the smaller companies, competitors, or their customers, let alone the economy. What we're seeing today is large corporations dictating to small businesses their social policies, not economic policies. These social policies are putting small family businesses out of business. In conclusion, it's really not, because I'm going to go beyond this. In conclusion, Senate Bill 980 serves to protect our state's business environment. Well, my guess would be there'll be nobody here, because I didn't call the 3 people I've talked to at home about this to let them know that I was testifying today. So unfortunately for you, this is the beginning of second hour, and I'm going to do a little bit of teaching before I move on. Where did this come from? Hopefully you were going to ask that, and I'll just answer it right now. Not 3 different people that I know that run small businesses in my area have started getting questionnaires dealing with DEI, ESG things, and what they're doing, they build a small component, anywhere from airplanes to agriculture equipment, and then they sell it to a subcontractor that sells it to a subcontractor that finally gets it to the point. And where I live at, we don't have, all our businesses aren't large enough to have lawyers, accountants, etc., to focus on these, let alone measure what that company's doing in the environment. Most of the time we consider that the machinists I'm talking about, what do? To keep their price down, they're trying to get rid of waste. That's what, lower the amount of waste that they've got, and that's what value they have. I use welding coupons from a manufacturer in Davies County for my kids to practice weld on. If they have to start keeping track of that weight, they're no longer going to let me have those free coupons. I'm not there anymore, but the ag teacher have those free coupons, because they're going to have to measure the weight of that metal that they're sending away, and then they're going to get dinged for that, and then those welding coupons are not going to be available. I know that sounds extreme, but let's be realistic. Those are things I'm worried about. These 3 businesses said the 2 major things that they think they're fighting, there's all kinds of things, right, with inflation, but product liability insurance, and anybody listening, I'm not going after the insurance companies, and I don't know whose fault it is, but the explosion of product liability insurance for small people building agriculture equipment or little equipment in my area, because they're not a big company. They don't feel like they can spread that cost as easily, and it's going to, as they raise the cost of a bale feeder, the big companies are going to end up owning all the bale feeding business, buying those. Most of you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, that's one important point with those 3 businesses. So they talked to me about it and been talking to me since when I was state rep. And I guess it got to the point where I started talking to people, and with the help of Matt, my chief of staff and stuff, we started looking for it in this piece of legislation that we found. Now, yes, you're right. It's not over, because there's going to be many people opposing this, and I want to do a couple more things. Smile, Senator Beck. The first one is A Nation at Risk. I watched the elevation on that started in 1984, and what that's done to education is we've continued to put more and more accountability in. It hasn't done very much good. Hazardous analysis and critical control points. I don't know, I have 1 cattle farmer, 2 cattle farmers up there. People that raise livestock. As an ag teacher, I had kids write speeches on this and say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yes, I threw that pun in because of where I'm from. Hazard analysis, critical control points is supposed to save the world. Nobody's going to get sick anymore from any food product. And for those of us that know, where does most food contamination come from? At the home during preparation, right? Or in the restaurant during preparation. It's not stuff. So we passed these laws, and the U.S. government forced this regulation, and this is another thing that has happened. They got rid of our small packers in our state because they couldn't afford to get this accomplished. Do you understand that? We ended up with 4 major packers, great big businesses, because they can afford to do this. Now they control the business. So this is something that I think we need to discuss in this bill. All right. Another piece, remember, nobody else is going to be up here helping me with this. Another thing is called VFD, for those of us that raise livestock. That was just a heckish good idea, because we know that people like me want to go buy $500 bottles of medicine at 100 cc's, and we want to inject it in trees to do that. So now we decided, because I was so crooked raising my cattle and hogs and wanted to poison everybody in the world, that I have to go to the veterinarian and get a VFD, and of course they're supposed to come out and check every hoof and ear to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, and I pay them extra money. And this VFD feed directive, you know, when I was sitting at Illinois at a national hog show, a friend of mine that works for a major feed company said this is the best darn thing to ever happen for us, because it's going to run all the small feed mills where you're at out of business. They cannot afford to follow that rule. And within 20 years, what happened to feed being mixed in Chillicothe, Missouri? 1 left. Before then, there was 4 or 5. Now we're down to 1 because this was a good idea. And where I represent, if you look at that, we're yesterday perfected a bill to provide tax credits to rural Missouri to be able to improve employment opportunities. Product liability, ESG, DEI things on these little bitty businesses are going to cause a problem. I believe that. Ford Manufacturing, Clay Como, can do this all they want there, and they can pass that on when I buy a Ford car. But running out my little machinists, little manufacturing things in my area that employ 5 or 6 people, for those of you that come from the large areas, that means nothing to you, but where I'm at, that means a lot whenever we take and close those down. So with that additional part that you didn't want, I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator, and I always enjoy listening to your teachings. So,
That's good. It wasn't always, I didn't always have a crowd in front of me that enjoyed all of it.
Anyway, I appreciate your information, and so are there any questions for the Senator? Yes. Do you have any questions for the Senator at this moment?
Yeah.
Seeing none,
Yes.
so if
Yes.
we...
Yes.
Oh, we got one here. Senator Mosley.
So this bill doesn't want to punish anyone who requires DEI classifications at their business.
No, I'm not.
What are you trying to do? I'm trying
if
to
you look
understand.
at it, if a machinist company in Chillicothe, Missouri, if they want to use DEI as part of their decision making, if they want to use ESG as their decision making, this bill doesn't punish them. It is those companies in my area being forced through contractual agreements. And right now, the people that supplied me stuff, it's a check mark. It's just something that supposedly doesn't mean anything whenever they go through and start looking at the contracts. If a company wants to use it in my area on their own, that's fine. But if they want to compete for contracts to supply stuff to other larger companies and they're not using these things, I'm trying to keep them from being forced to. Is that helpful in what the goal of this is?
You're trying to keep the company, your small businesses, from having to have DEI classification.
To force their subcontractors to force companies to supply them stuff, yes. Yes, that is very true. I'll pick on agriculture. Hopefully there's no lobbyists for them in here. John Deere, that's the green stuff that I have at my place. John Deere Company wants to use DEI, ESG principles to run their company. Whether I agree with it personally or not, I don't care. That is the chamber type of idea is what I'm saying. If they want to do it, fine. But then when they want to start forcing it on all the subcontractors that they work with, and they finally get to the machinist that keeps coming back in my head because he sits behind me in church, and say that you will have to do all these standards. They don't have the employees to do it. They have to start keeping track of things that it will run them out of business. I don't know how to understand that, because it's going to put so many white-collar workers in their business to manage this if it goes to a certain point, that they're just going to have to say, no, you 15 people that are employed here, go find something else to do. And that's what I'm interested in really stopping. I'm not stopping. If Rusty Black Incorporated wants to do this at my place, I can do it. But I can't force my subcontractors in my state that I might do something with to follow that plan. I hope that helps a little bit.
So how are they forcing the subcontractors to participate in DEI?
We're not at this point. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's examples I've read on the internet. In some cases they have. At this point in time, the companies that brought this to me, it's been in a questionnaire system. When they send you an RFP, supposedly non-scored in that RFP are questions dealing with ESG and DEI.
Okay. What kind of questions do they have for DEI?
Whether you are using those, some of those principles in your business plan. Now, that's separate from the contract to build the gadget. But if you're using those in your plan, and the companies that I represent do not have staff to work on DEI and ESG as a major focus of where they're at. You know, and when we look at those letters, and we get in debates all the time about them, right? The individual words are not bad, but when you start putting standards on it that some people have to live with, it does get difficult. Okay?
All right.
So they have a hard time having diversity and inclusion in their small company. Is that what you're saying?
Where I'm at, that is for sure. If you would have come and met me 20 years ago and looked at my classroom where I'm at, you know, I probably in my 33-year period had, and I am guessing, I probably had 3 to 4 students that have some kind of Latino
Hispanic
ethnicity in their family.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say total, other than, well, you wouldn't think it's funny, but at home they did. I can think of 5 black students that I had,
mm-hmm.
and it wasn't like I put up a sign, I don't want you here. It was the choices I made. It was the choices people made, and the fact that our population where I was at of minorities, if you drove up through my area, come visit me, you and Jay sometime, you will see that there's a very, very limited number of minorities where I live at. So if those businesses start to have to meet some standards, they may have to, this is exaggerated, in no way this is happening, some person might have to be hired by 5 companies so they can meet some standard.
So are they required now to meet these standards?
The companies that I represent my areas,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say no on the whole. There may be, I
So
have
then what's the
large
point of this bill?
companies that also have manufacturing in my area. I can think of 2. Donaldson's at Chillicothe, and then, they're in Sedalia too, the new place in Sedalia. They have a plant in Maryville. Those are the 2 major ones that I know, and I'm sure within their company organization, since they're a nationwide company, they probably do have policies as you're discussing.
Okay.
There.
Well, you just said they're not required to meet these standards, so if
No,
they're not
I
required.
said the majority of the companies where I'm at would not be required. If I went to this plant, the guy sits behind me in church, more than likely, I doubt if they have any policy dealing with that in their company. You know, up until about 6 months ago, 2 brothers and another guy owned that company. worked on the floor and signed the paychecks. And my guess is their policy beyond meeting tax requirements was probably about as deep as their corporate policy went. And I probably shouldn't be saying that because I have no idea, but my guess is that wasn't what they weren't worried about adding more policies.
Okay.
Okay,
Is there any
so
other
if
questions?
If it's
I'm
not,
sorry?
If it's not required, then why did you propose this bill?
Because I don't want, again, the two companies in my town that may require it at their business.
You're saying they
Donaldson's.
may require it, but they don't currently.
But for their business, ma'am, their business inside their wall, I said there's a chance Donaldson Corporation, I would imagine, they have different policies around this. What I'm trying to stop is to keep that inside their wall and not make a subcontractor, and you understand what I'm saying, right? This Donaldson company put filters together. Well, the metal part of it, they may have stamped and put together at a small company across town in my little town, and that company that employs 10 or 12 people with two brothers and another guy that invested, I don't want Donaldson's to force them to meet those requirements because I believe it ultimately will close them down and then we lose employers all over rural Missouri.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm saying if they haven't done it so far, thus far, why is this a required? Why are you coming up with this bill?
Go back to my discussion about VFD, Veterinary Feed Directive. At first, that was a suggestion, and the federal government ended up turning it into mandatory, and the animal drug companies aren't sitting behind me, so I'll say they enjoyed that because that put more dollars in their pocket. Hazard analysis critical control points.
Putting his foot right in his mouth.
What?
Go ahead.
No, repeat that so I can see.
Go ahead. I said you keep talking.
Hazard analysis critical control points at first was suggestions, and then it turned into something that ended up being even federal law, and therefore, as I said, small packing facilities, which are places, we call them butcher places where we live at, it ended up running them out of business with these rules. Okay?
I'll let Beck ask his question.
Thank you. Are we finished here? Yes. Okay, Senator Beck.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi. So my fault is I didn't read this earlier. I read it this morning when I came in my office, and I kept reading through it, and then I kept looking back to see who the bill sponsor was. And I kept looking back, and it just like, it blew me away. So just so you know that. And I don't think I'm the only one that's had that same reaction. So my questions for you is a couple of them. One, and I think you're probably thinking of Nucor in Sedalia. That's up
Nucor is
yeah.
one in Maryville.
I get around the state too. So, but
Yeah, I know.
so
You haven't stopped by my place yet.
so I'm usually on the other side of things sometimes, but this time I find this interesting because you made a couple comments, and I'm just going to go into that. I'm not even going to get into the whole boycott thing. I'm not, still trying to wrap my head around that part. But the DEI ESG language that you're kind of putting in here. Now you're dealing with and I'm going to give you some examples, and you can tell me if they would qualify to be able to get a public contract, right? Because you're basically saying they wouldn't be able to get a public contract, correct? If they have these policies, if they force these policies, as you use the term force, I think it's you enter into a contract and you do whatever. If you're a small company and you make a part, if you make a spring or a bracket or whatever you make, Walmart used to do this years ago. They would tell their suppliers, you know what, you're charging me $8 for that, but you need to charge me $7.59. I don't care how you do it and what you do and how you do it. And so they move it offshores or whatever, and they force them to do whatever. They didn't force them to keep
dealt with Walmart.
Well, I don't like Walmart. I'm not a Walmart fan, and I'll let everybody know that in the world. I don't go there. I don't shop there. So what I'm going to ask you, the question I'm going to ask you is, and you tell me if they would be able to do this. So the state buys a lot of vehicles, right? We buy trucks and things. So we have two manufacturers in this state, Ford, that makes F-150s, and then we have on my side of the state, they make Canyons and Colorados at GM plant. And they have policies that they go down and they try to get some subcontractors to do parts and little things. Seats are subbed out. A lot of these things are, as you know. Some goes overseas, some stays here.
Yeah,
some
Company and Home builds, at one time, built ashtrays for Boeing.
Yeah, and like Bodine made engines for Toyota and whatever and stuff. So they say, okay, we need you to adhere to these policies and for you to sell us that part. Now, what this bill would do, correct me if I'm wrong, is say that you can't do that, right? One, you can't do that. So, is that correct?
That company, it would keep that company from forcing it on to smaller.
Well, we're using the term force,
Yeah.
but I don't believe it's force because you can either enter into a contract or not, correct?
Repeat that?
You can either enter into a contract or not. I mean,
Correct.
you're not forced to sign a contract.
Correct.
Okay, and I get it. Look, I understand. And I can go into the, we can go into the, a lot of these CAFOs and all these other things that have forced everybody out. There's a big, huge meatpacking plant that the state is incentivizing. That's not a word, according to Donnie T. Incentivize. They put incentives to this big meatpacking plant that's going right outside in Warrenton. And so they're actually, we're picking winners and losers like what we say around here.
And don't forget, in today's society, that plant coming in is really probably not considered, it's not the large company. It is mom and pop company, and that's what size some of these rules that I talked about has caused to be the mom and pop.
Yeah. So I understand your dilemma, and I understand that of the small businesses being pushed out, and I'm trying not to go too long, but I think this is a super important issue, and I know there's people that probably want to testify against it. But my question to you is so Ford or GM, they put these on these other companies, and now the state will no longer buy trucks from them, right? I mean, that's the gist of your bill.
That was something that I discussed. I don't see it that way. I see that when they're signing the boycott part of it.
Well, I'm at the boycott.
And then them forcing their DEI, ESG, and ESG is not in here, and I said I should have done that. Forcing those on the subcontractors. I don't see that the state, I don't read it, and somebody that's lawyers, that's lobbyists behind me will tell me I'm wrong, but I don't read it that Missouri could not buy from Ford. Would I want that to happen? That'd be absolutely not. What I'm saying is if Ford forced it down, maybe I don't have it, maybe the group that I work with didn't write it well enough. If John Deere decides to come into our place, and John Deere has Missouri, and John Deere has those rules, they get to have those rules. I'm trying to do what you said, stop it. The reason why the state's written into it, how many times do we do things here at government and we bypass the state, or we say the state doesn't have to follow this rule, whether it's minimum wage. What I read something this morning where Panera Bread doesn't have to follow the minimum wage in California or something. Probably not right. It's hard to find right stuff. But that's another reason why the state's in here. I didn't want somebody to come say, you're forcing Ford to do this, you're forcing GM to do this, but then you're letting the government skip all these rules, okay?
Yeah, I just the way I read it, and maybe it needs to have some work. I don't know. I'm really quite honestly, I'm not sure that I even like the premise of it. But and I think you and I probably see things the same way in a lot of different areas.
We do.
But I also think that all the reasons that small business can't exist, I think have been caused by other things. And maybe that's a conversation we have. I'm not going to belabor this because
I want to say that this isn't going to fix everything in the world like anything else we do.
100%.
Okay.
Also,
Let's move on. And what I'd like to do is give these people that have come to voice their support to be able to have that opportunity. So if there's anybody here who would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 980, please come forward. Okay, thank you. Seeing none, do we have one? Here we go. There you go.
Someone, right? I'm sure there's others.
So please state your name and who you're representing.
Good morning, Madam Chair,
and
members of the committee.
Okay, go ahead.
James Harris, for the record, representing the Opportunity Solution Project. just want to go on the record in support of this legislation.
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions for this witness? Yes.
I've changed my
Senator
view. I've changed my view on the entire bill now. Thank
There
you.
we go. There we go. Thank you so much.
He's married to Chillicothe, and he's a good guy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, is there anybody else who would like to testify in favor of? Seeing none. Would there first person that would like to testify in opposition to please come forward? And I have to remind us all that we're going to make our statements brief. We'll have opportunity to visit with committee members or anything later if you'd like, but we need to get through our committee.
Well, I'll put away my 5 pages of testimony, Madam Chair. Philip Arnson with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I want to start off, and I do want to thank the bill sponsor for having conversations with us about it, and we hope we can continue to have conversations about this legislation. But we'd like to go on the record in opposition. We have a couple main concerns about the legislation. The first is it does create new mandates on business. The first section dealing with the economic boycotts and contracting with the state, that is a backdoor mandate. We think another thing the committee needs to consider on that is whenever you change the kind of procurement requirements, there can be adverse impacts, whether that's cost or potentially who's able to contract with the state. And again, it is somewhat of a backdoor mandate. And then the second provision does dictate what companies can put into kind of private contracts and what they can utilize whenever they're deciding who to contract with folks. And so we've got concerns on that. And then the second big concern we have is this does increase the potential for litigation and large amounts of legal liability if they violate any of the provisions. And so anytime we're increasing the liability on private entities, we do have concerns because that could potentially limit who wants to come to Missouri and operate in Missouri, and then also who wants to start a business in Missouri. And so I will keep it brief.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Next. Testifying in opposition to.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, Associated Industries in Missouri, for many of the reasons you just heard. We're opposed particularly to 431-205 in the bill because it does represent state government interference in private contracts. It doesn't just talk about who the state can contract with, but it actually gets into private contracts. It says if a company wants to require something in their contract, they can't do it. And it provides remedies, which include civil actions against the company, as well as enforcement by the Attorney General. And we think government should stay out of our contracts, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Next in opposition to.
Madam Chair, Shannon Cooper today representing the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce as well as the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City, and I'll pile on with everybody else here. Our concern is that if our business members choose to do this, they should have the right, and that's where we're at. We consistently take that position that our member companies, if they want to have a DEI policy, they should be allowed to do that without fear of being sued or without being forced to contract with somebody, quite frankly, that does not share their beliefs. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Appreciate that. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brent Tempo here on behalf of the Missouri Speech and Hearing Association as well as BJC Healthcare. This essentially puts us in conflict with our national accreditation agency who require DEI requirements in our federal funding mechanism, CMS. So for those reasons, we oppose this bill.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you. Or do we have anybody else who would like to testify in opposition to? Please come forward.
Morning.
Good morning.
Nimrod Chappell with the Missouri State Conference of the NAACP. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I have to tell you that when I first looked at this bill, I had some grave concerns because you remember when you passed Senate Bill 43 under Governor Greitens that was signed back in 2017, brought forward in the same chamber by then Senator Romines. I told you that Missouri was on a downhill track promoting Jim Crow laws that were going to disenfranchise not only the most affected and disadvantaged individuals in this society, but ultimately harm Missouri as a whole. Because what we do to the least of these, we do unto ourselves. And you've got to believe that in a state where people still don't get along, where we've got racial strife and issues that are from border to border, top to bottom, this is only going to exacerbate problems. When I looked at this chapter in 431, usually when I think about civil rights laws, I think about chapter 213, right? What this does is not only prevent folks from utilizing their right to contract, interfering with private companies, not even contracting with the state, relying on public dollars, but preventing them from considering issues that may be in terms of their faith, their moral code, or character. And ultimately, it only further exacerbates the problem created by Senate Bill 43. And let's be clear, this body brought forth legislation that was approved and signed by the governor that legalized discrimination in the state of Missouri. If somebody harasses, retaliates, or discriminates against a person on their God-given characteristics at work, you cannot sue that person in court. That is an abomination, right? This adds on to that. We worried then that that same legislation would propagate things just like this. Now you're telling private companies that they can't consider equity, diversity, and inclusiveness, that you can't consider that. And then you have the audacity to define skin color as one of those issues. This will be a first and a new low for the state of Missouri.
Okay. Thank you,
I'll
sir.
take any questions.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to testify in opposition to?
Good morning,
Good
Madam
morning.
Chair, members of the committee. Katie Gamble here on behalf of the Greater St. Louis Inc. and the Health Forward Foundation. Just want to go on record in opposition for the information provided earlier.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, do we have anybody who would like to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing none. So you have any final remarks, Senator? All right. Seeing that, and that concludes this hearing on Senate Bill 980. Okay, and I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Received a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Ayes have it. We are now adjourned. Thank you.